Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with Investor More, and we are looking at a very ugly foreclosure house today. And I want to talk about the pros and cons to buying foreclosures, what to look out for, how it works, and you don't have to buy a foreclosure to get a good deal either. So this is a property that was for sale in my area. It's under contract now. And back when we had the foreclosure crisis, I mean, you can tell this one might or might not be a foreclosure based on how it looks from the outside. But back when we had the foreclosure crisis, a lot of people felt the only way to get a good deal was to buy a foreclosure. You had to buy a foreclosure, maybe a short sale. Otherwise, there's just no way to flip houses or get good rentals. Well, fast forward 10 years, there's been very few foreclosures. And so you've got to have to find other ways to get good deals. And something else that people think, that's a little dangerous there, having a deep mechanical pit. A lot of people think all foreclosures are good deals too, and that's just not the case. Now, this property does have some things going for it. You might see some bad signs though, like the warning signs on it, but I believe there's a fire and massive amounts of discoloration in the basement that we will show you. So just because it's a foreclosure does not mean it's a good deal. And some people get disappointed when they say, oh, I saw a foreclosure come for sale and it's not cheap enough for me to make a bunch of money, and the bank isn't selling it for $100,000 when it's worth $400,000. And that is also very true. Banks are not out there just to sell properties for pennies on the dollar. They have investors, they have owners, they have people that they have to look out for financially. And so they want to sell their houses for as much as they possibly can, just like any other seller would want to sell their houses for as much as they can too. So there's a lot of things to consider. But for the most part, buying a foreclosure is very similar to buying any other house on the MLS. Now, there's some instances where it's different. Sometimes banks will put them on auctions and you'll have to bid online or maybe even bid in person. That's very rare. We're talking about houses that have already gone through the foreclosure process, so the bank owns them. We're not talking about public trustee sales or courthouse step sales. The bank owns it and it's on their books. They're trying to sell it. And 95% of the time, the bank will hire a real estate agent. They will list it. They'll take pictures. They'll put it on MLS and advertise it and try to sell it just like a normal house. I used to do this as a real estate agent many years ago. I used to sell HUDs. I used to sell foreclosures for 30 or 40 different banks. I loved it. It was tons of fun. There aren't any foreclosures anymore for the most part, so I stopped doing it. But this one brought back some memories of that, and I've said it before, but man, if I had my YouTube channel back then, the videos I could show of the properties I would get, that would have been a fun YouTube channel. I have lots of pictures, but I don't have any videos of them. So obviously, some people probably broke into this house, were squatting in there, or just had some absolutely horrible tenants. Who knows? I mean, there's a chance the owners did this to the house, but pretty unlikely. I guess maybe if they're losing the house to foreclosure, it's possible, but it needs some paint, just a little bit of paint. And upstairs, you can tell this really wasn't that bad of a house at one point. It's an older home, but most of the windows were newer until they were, and I don't know if they were boarded up just to prevent vandalism or people breaking in, or if they're boarded up because they're all broken. I think for the most part, most of them looked to be intact. And you can paint over this stuff. It's not always fun, but now when you do that to the doors, that makes it tricky because those were some nice old doors too. That window looks like it might have been broken. That was an older window, but most of them are newer and, got some old school light fixtures. It was probably a pretty neat house at one point. Nice of them to censor out part of that for us, whatever they wrote on the wall. This also reminds me a little bit of the Sabre house. If you guys remember that, I bought a flip kind of in this same area where someone had broken in, and I can't remember, I think it was it while I owned it? I think it was while I owned it. Someone broke in and spray painted Sabre all over the house, SABER, RIP, and it turns out there's a guy named Sabre who had, I can't remember if he had, anyway, he had passed away, and I don't remember if it was in that house or just close to that house. I think it's just in that area, and people targeted that house because it was vacant. And so I'll try and link to that video if I can remember. That was a very interesting deal. That was a great flip, worked out really well. But yeah, Sabre was haunting us for a little while, and this house may have been haunted here for a while too. But here's the bad part, the interesting part. And when you're buying a foreclosure, that's what I meant to talk about this whole time. Sorry. Like I said, it's similar to buying other houses. There are some differences. They'll require earnest money, and it almost a lot of times has to be a certified check just to prove you got the money. And they'll want proof of funds letter or a pre-qual letter. And you can see they had some kind of fire down here, and I'm guessing they put the fire out, and all the water caused mold. Really not a good situation down in this basement. I did have to sign a mold disclosure to go in here as well, which is very smart to do that as a real estate agent. But you can tell here was very, very nice at one point too. I mean, not anymore, but at one point it was very, very nice down here. But you'll need a proof of funds letter, pre-qual letter showing you can buy the property. You submit an offer. Sometimes foreclosures and banks will give precedent to owner-occupants. So they'll have a short owner-occupied only period where only owner-occupants who plan to live in the home can submit offers. Some banks do that, some don't. HUD does that. And then, you can go through an inspection process like you can with another property. The big difference there is a lot of times these properties are winterized. They don't have water on or utilities on. So as a buyer, you might actually have to pay to get those utilities turned back on, or sometimes the seller will pay for them. And sometimes you can't turn on the water or power if there's issues like this. And they had the power on upstairs though. Hopefully they've got it shut off down here to most of these lights that seem to be fried. But they probably don't have the water on. You might not be able to turn the water on because of damage, different issues. You're missing a faucet right there. And so you can do a pressure test. There's just a lot of things you've got to really take faith on, or not take faith, but just understand they're probably going to be wrong. There's probably going to be damage you can't see, probably going to be issues you can't see, and taking this on is going to be quite the project. This is a furnace water heater room. They are gone, so I don't know if that's where the fire started or if that's what happened, but they're completely gone. And like I said, this house used to be pretty nice at one point. So the banks really aren't trying to get, sell properties for pennies on the dollar. It's very similar to other sales. There's really not a whole lot of difference there, except you really need a pre-qualification letter, proof of funds. And if you're trying to wholesale properties, it's a little harder to do that on properties like this than regular properties. So that's this property. No, I'm not buying it. It wasn't a horrible deal, but it would take a lot of work. You probably have to gut this whole basement, completely redo it. And this is a project that would take a whole lot of time. But if you have questions about foreclosures, HUD, drop them down below in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And we may or may not see more foreclosures coming up. I'm guessing maybe a small uptick, but nothing like we saw in 2008 when there were 10 times the foreclosure.